All right, guys, so here's where we're at. I took the stator cover off, and I took the bolt out of the center here. I just used my electric impact and was able to get that bolt off. So we're gonna try to see if the starter clutch and things back here are what's holding this up and making the motor have that tight spot, and check it out and see if that's what it is. So I'm going to try to get my flywheel puller in here. I haven't used this particular flywheel puller yet, and see if I can figure it out, get this to pop out so we can get this flywheel off here and check the starter clutch behind it. All right, so I use the flywheel puller here to pull off the flywheel. It just popped loose. I'm going to show you something I had to do to it, but I got to remove this carefully because I had to use a nut behind this bolt here. So because my bolt here was the same size thread is going into the crank, but this bolt was too short. So I had to put a little nut and washer behind it. And now I got to see how I can capture that. I don't think it will fall through, but I don't want it falling down into the crank. So I'm going to have to use both hands and try to see if I can get that out before I pull this flywheel completely off. Okay, so here you can see my nut that I used. So I just used this nut, put it in, and then use the flywheel puller against this nut, and that way it was able to pull the flywheel off. So let's get it off and take a look and see if we can find out what's going on back here. All right, guys, well, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that this is, well, I guess this should be the bad news, that this is spinning freely. So what I did was I stuck my magnet down into the oil sump, and I don't know if you can see what this is, but it came out with a bunch of bits of metal and sludge and stuff in the bottom. I haven't drained the oil yet on this, but I think that's gonna be the next thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna clean my oil container out real good, my drain pan. We're gonna drain this oil. I think we might have a spun bearing. So that's the bad news. So let's take a look at it. We may be having a parts spike here. So let's see what we can find out. All right, guys, you can see the metallic layer in this pan. It's not looking good. Not looking good at all. Which sucks because this bike was in such good shape. So now it's to decide what to do. All right, guys, I'm going to be honest with you here. I'm a little confused. I just put the flywheel back on just to see what would happen. And before I could turn this over, and the motor would like roll over halfway, and then it would lock so bad I had to use a huge breaker bar to get it to turn over. And it's turning over fine. I don't want to turn it over too much because, like I said, I just drained the oil in it. But I don't understand that. It's kind of strange. I may put this thing back together, put the oil, or not this oil, but put some oil in it, filter on it, put the plugs back in it and see what happens when we crank it. All right, guys, here's where we're at. I can turn the bike over. I don't know if you can see this. And it's turning over a lot better than it was. So we're gonna have to, sorry, I don't have much room over here. We're gonna have to get a better battery on this thing and see what we can do. But at least it's turning over now. Before it would turn over 2 or 3, clicks, and then it would just lock the motor. So let's see what's going on. All right, guys, so after a while of cranking, got it on my car battery. Let's see, it, I got it to fire a little bit. So it is cranking. I did have it run for probably 5-10 seconds. I think I'm going to take these carbs off. I'm sure these carbs are pretty gunked up, but I didn't want to do that until I was sure that the motor would turn over. So I think we're getting somewhere with it. I feel like, that definitely made me feel a lot better that the motor's not locked up. And it is running some, just a little bit. So I'm going to probably take the carbs off. Might try to mess with it a little bit more, see if we can get it started. The starter wire was getting pretty hot, so I didn't want to overheat anything. So I'm gonna let it cool down for a few minutes and then try it again. If I get it running, I'll shoot it on video, but right now I think the carbs need to come off and get a good cleaning. All right, guys, we're out here working on the Superhawk. I tried to have it running the other day, was able to get it started a little bit. Was able to get it to run for maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds at the most. It would start up, then shut down like it wasn't getting any fuel. I'm pretty sure these carbs are probably stopped up and need to be removed. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to pull them off, go through them, check them out, get them cleaned up, and see how they look. And I know this bike has been sitting for quite some time, and we need to see if those carbs are gunked up and clean and get them cleaned up. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to pull the airbox first and pull some of the other hoses and things, disconnect them, get the airbox out of the way, see what we need to do to get the carbs out. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Take these screws off on the top, and then there's some screws underneath. We'll pop those off and get this airbox off. Let's say we got the top of the airbox off. Now we're going to take these 2 screws out on each side of the snorkels. Take those off, and then we'll take the screws off that hold the bottom of the airbox to the carburetors. All right, so got the airbox off. You've got a bunch of hoses underneath this airbox on the front, the back, 2 in the front section there, this valve. So you've got a bunch of air hoses you have to work your hands down in here and get taken off to be able to get the top of the airbox off. So once you have that out of the way, you can see the 2 carbs sitting here. So next we're going to take a look. I'm going to take a look at the manual and go through the steps again, just to refresh my memory on it. And I highly suggest you get a manual when you're working on these bikes. It just helps give you little tips and things to follow to take things off properly. So I'm just kind of doing these videos to just show you how I did it. But I usually follow the manual on their steps and suggestions. And when I didn't, I have broken things. So, I highly suggest you get a manual before starting to tear into your bike. That will help you with success. So I'm going to look at the manual, see what the next steps are to taking these carbs off, and we'll go from there. All right, guys, let me catch you up where I'm at. Took apart all the hoses and loosened both of the bands that hold the carb on. Also, I popped the coolant line off right here, drained the coolant because this does have coolant or heater, as they call it, going to both carburetors. I disconnected the throttle cables here. And then what I did was I just put a long screwdriver down underneath this part of the carb right here and kind of pried up on it a little bit against the valve cover here, the bolt, and it popped the carbs up. So I think I'm ready to pull the carbs off. I think I got everything disconnected. Nope, I got to take the choke off. I forgot to take the choke. So let me get the choke cables taken off, and then I think the carbs are ready to come out. Like I said, just be careful. You've got the connector here that you have to remove, and then all the other little cables and vents, and this thing's got a lot on it. So get that done. Let me take the choke cables off and we'll pop this carb out. All right, guys, so here's the carbs off the bike, and you know, they look like carburetors. So what I'm going to do first, though, is I want to take the diaphragm covers off and check the diaphragms first, and get them out, because I want to blow some air through this system and make sure everything's blown out really good, and you don't want to blow a hole in those diaphragms. So I want to check them first, take them off, and then I'm going to take the float bowls off and check in there. I want to make sure that there's no crap or anything in the float bowls, which hopefully there is, and that's why it's running bad. So we're going to pop those diaphragms off first. Still have some fuel pouring out of this thing, which was weird because it was running like it wasn't getting any fuel, and I've got fuel running everywhere, but it could be something was blocked up in the carburetor. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, take these diaphragm covers off. All right, this is interesting. This is what I found underneath the diaphragm. I am not quite sure what that is. It almost feels like some kind of foam, but that was under the diaphragm. That's interesting. So it's definitely why we want to clean this up. It looks, I don't know what that is. It looks almost like it has a shell on it, like a bug of some type. Yeah, it's a stink bug. A stink bug in the diaphragm, underneath the diaphragm. Interesting. Okay, let's get into the next one. And look what fell out of the other side. Another one that's still partially alive. That's crazy. I don't know how they got in the diaphragm, but I guess they went. The vent holes were plugged, though. I don't know. I don't know how they got into the diaphragms of these carbs. Interesting. All right, so we got the diaphragms off. Both the diaphragms look good, other than having stink bugs in them. But so yeah, we're gonna get ready to pull the bowls off now. All right, guys, I did take the bowl off, and believe it or not, it wasn't that bad. Inside, I pulled all the main jet and the needle jet holder out. The slow jet looked like it was kind of plugged up. So here's the slow jet. I took it out, blew it out with air real good. Don't run a wire through these things. It can mess with the jets. So I'm going to put this one back together. I'm going to clean up around the bowl a little bit, and where the bowl sits. And the float looked fine as well, and so did the needle. So that all looked good. So we're just going to clean this up a little bit and put this one back together, and we'll take the other one apart. All right, I got the carb cleaned out, blasted it out with some air and some carb cleaner. The jets, the slow jets, looked a little clogged on this one as well. Inside it had like a film of, I wouldn't say varnish, but maybe it was like a varnishy film. Was able to get all that cleaned out. So now I'm going to put it back together, put the jets back in, and go ahead and put the bowl and the floats and all that back together. It's a pretty simple carburetor. Let's see here. I was going to try to bring up a picture of it, but of course my computer's not working. Okay. So there's the carburetor. It's pretty simple. Main jets, needle jets. I didn't take out the pilot screw, but the slow jets looked a little bit clogged, so got those cleaned out. So we're going to put all this back together now. The diaphragm looked good. The jet needle looked good as well. No wear on it. So we're going to put this all back together. Maybe we'll get lucky, and maybe we just had stuff in the carburetor, and hopefully this will help it run a little bit better. So let's see what we get. All right, got the carburetors cleaned back up, got the diaphragms back in. I cleaned out all the bug goop and poop and everything else that was in there. I'm going to put these back on now. When you're putting the diaphragms back in, they're very tricky, and you just have to play with them, but be patient with them. You can't get them back in there and get the springs back in. It's like an evil game of Jack in the Box for adults, but you can't do it. Just work with them and be patient and figure out a way to hold that spring. What I did was I packed the spring down in the cap, put it up against my stomach here in the side of the workbench, and just held it until I got the diaphragm in perfectly where I wanted the diaphragm needed to go, and then kind of slip that cap in there real quick and kind of hold that spring with your finger and slide it out of the way where it slides into its spot. So hope that helps. But so now we're gonna go ahead and put this car back on the bike, and let's see if it runs. Okay, what I've done in the past to get these carburetors on a little bit easier is I'll heat these boots up with my heat gun, and I usually keep the paper stuffed in it while I do that. I'll heat those up, and then I'll take a little bit of grease. I've started using this Bell Ray waterproof grease, works pretty good. Just take a real thin layer and rub around those rubber boots, or you can also use rubbing alcohol as a pretty good lubricant, and it'll help those slide on a little bit easier. This one, I think I'm going to use grease because I probably will have to pull these carbs again in the future if I decide to do the chain tensioners, which I'll probably do. And I think I have to pull them to get to this front one. But for now, I want to make sure this thing runs right before I go doing all that work. So here's all the things we have to hook back up. We have to hook back up the choke cables. We have these little water coolant lines down here too. We have to hook those back up. So we're going to hook those up, see how we can maneuver all this stuff in. I'll probably go ahead and heat these up pretty good and rub the grease in them, and hopefully I can get everything else hooked up before they cool down and get hard again. But that's what I'm going to try to do. Let's see if it works. Okay, got the carburetor back in. Let me show you how I did the carburetor. This is how I did it, and I heated up those boots like I told you, but I couldn't get a lot of pressure down on the carburetor to get the back part popped in. So I popped the front end, got the back end, and I used a screwdriver under the back part of this boot here just to kind of pull it back a little bit. I put a ratchet strap around the carbs and above the exhaust, and then just crank down on it a little bit as I kind of pried back on the rubber boot, and it popped right into place. So should have it in there. I attached the coolant lines that go around the carb, or heater lines that go around the carburetors. So now we're going to take this off, and we're going to get the last little bit of stuff connected back up. So that's how I did it, and it dropped in nice and smooth, and didn't have to use a lot of pressure trying to push on it and all that, so it worked perfect. All right, guys, so put all the airbox back on. I think you got all the hoses and vacuum line, all that stuff's connected up. Put antifreeze back in the bike. Got the airbox all on. So I guess we're ready to try to test fire this bike again. So I'm going to get it off the lift, get it outside. I don't have a battery for it yet. So I'm just going to jump it off my car again and see if we can get this thing running. And, I'll put my IV fuel bottle back on it, and we'll see if we can get this thing fired up. Keeping our fingers crossed. So let's see what we can do. All right, guys, it took a little cranking, but it's running. It wouldn't do this before, so this is definitely a good sign. Sounds good. Sounds healthy. Got a little steam in here, just burning stuff off the exhaust. Gonna let it warm up for a minute before we're gonna crack in the throttle or anything like that. But so it must have been something to do with those carbs. Something was plugged up in there. I'll be back in a minute. All right, guys, here's where we're at on the bike. I had it running. It was running great. I shut it down and went to restart it. And when I did, now the motor's acting like it's locked again, like it was before. Not getting anything out of it. It'll start to turn over, and then it gets just in this point where it won't rotate the motor over again, like it's locked, like it was doing earlier. All right, guys. Well, I think my Superhawk story is over. I don't know if you can see that there. I decided to drain the oil, and there's metal in the oil again. I just changed this oil, and you can see all the metal flakes floating around in it. So I'm going to pull the oil pan. I think this motor is got a spun bearing. It's just totally locked up again, and it did this to me before. I pulled the flywheel off, checked some things, put it back together, and it ran. Heard it running. Sounded great when it was running. After I turned the camera off, I let it sit for a while, tried to start it again. It did start. Ran it a little bit. I revved it up just a little, not real hard, just revved it a little. And when it was coming back down after the rev, it just locked and shut off. So I think it's done. So I'm going to pull the oil pan. We're just going to take a look and see what is in the oil pan and see if we can, see what we can see. So I'm going to try to pull that now. All right, guys, here's kind of where I'm at on this bike. Here's the oil pan. Pulled the oil pan off. A bunch of metal in the oil pan. So, not sure what to do with this bike yet. The bike overall is in really good shape. Doesn't look like it now because all the fairings are off of it, but it's in really good shape. Swing arm, I mean, everything, the brakes, everything seemed to work properly. Radiators are good. Everything is good on it. I've taken this side apart. So I just wanted to check and make sure the clutch mechanism and everything, nothing's binding up. Now, the bike was running, and I let it run for a little bit to warm up. It was running fine. cracked the throttle just a little bit. I mean, maybe like 3 grand, if that. And it revved up once, fine, making a weird little bit of noise. So I was like, huh. Revved it up again, about the same thing. Revved up, coming down, motor locked and shut off. So I let it sit for a while, tried to crank it, nothing, just totally locked. Brought it in here, started tearing stuff apart, went over to the other side, turned the flywheel back and forth, and was able to get the motor to turn back over again. After a while, it finally broke loose and was turning over. So I drained the oil, bunch of metal in the oil. So I went ahead and I was like, I'm going to pull off this side, see what I can see over here. The starter gear wasn't bound up. That was moving fine. I pulled the starter out, checked that. Everything's fine. Believe it's the bearings in this thing are gone. So what I'm going to do for now is just kind of slap everything back in it, put the cases back on just barely, because I have another project I'm working on at the same time, and I just don't have the space to tear this apart and have a motor torn apart in my garage while I decide if I'm going to replace the bearings and try to get this back on the road. I want to think about it a little bit, and I don't want to rush through it. So what I'm going to do is just put everything back, kind of bag it up, put it back together enough to just get it out of the garage and move around, and then decide what I'm going to do with it. I really hate to part it out, but I do these bikes for fun, just to kind of flip, get them going again, make a little bit of money off of them, and get them back on the road. Whereas this one's going to take a lot of time, and I want to figure out how much money it would take to do it, to see if it's even worth it. It may not even be worth it. But this is one of those bikes I saw when I was young and loved the look of the bike, loved the style of the bike, and wanted to experience a little bit, but it just may not be worth it. So I'm going to do that for now. This is going to probably be the last video on this bike for a while. And so we'll see. We're going to move on to finish up the VF750F. So if you're interested in those videos, check out those. I'm going to have a lot more to come on those. And I have 4 other bikes. So I want to do maintenance on these bikes during the winter. I still ride my Goldwing all the time. I commute back and forth to work on it, even in the winter. And I still ride the KLR 650 when I have a chance. So those 2 bikes aren't going to get winterized, but there's a lot of maintenance stuff that I want to do to all 4 of them. So I want to go through all 4 bikes and do all the maintenance on them, the major maintenance. And that's why I don't have time to do a motor right now. So I'm going to decide what to do on this bike. If, like I said, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe. We're going to have more videos to come. And, we'll decide what we're going to do with this bike. May have more videos to come on this bike. So thanks for watching. Have a good one.